All right, it's recording. I love this thing. It's so fun. Welcome to today's Blab. Today we're talking body language, influence, psychology. I'm joined by my man Curtis in Victoria here, and then Mike Bonker out of Montreal. And we're just going to be chatting about this stuff. And every week, we just started doing this about 5 weeks ago, just having this blab, having this conversation about business, having a glass of whiskey. At least I have been. Look, Curtis has got his. Mike, you?
Sorry, I'm on coffee.
On the coffee whiskey. Curtis, what are you drinking today?
Glenlivet 15.
All right. Oh, 15. I just tried this stuff. It was I couldn't find the 15 or 18, but this was beside 12, and the Glenlivet Founders Reserve is delicious.
Yeah, so I just bought a bottle of that.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. I like it. And that's what we're drinking today.
Hey,
so
you know what? You need to have a sponsor.
I should have a sponsor. It's I need to be able to fund this thing. It's very expensive drinking all day.
I've got a contact for us. Yeah.
That's it, man. And I mean the whole purpose of this as we do this intro is the idea around it. And I've got Beehive Salon is joined. That's my man. Is that James, right?
Yeah.
Jay Money. What's up, dude? Welcome. The whole purpose of this was, I've got all sorts of different places online. We do webinars, all this sort of professional funnels and all these things. And the reason that we put the Whiskey Friday together was just an idea I had years ago, but just to have a casual conversation about high-level ideas. The same as Curtis and I get together all the time because we're local and not loco, but local. And we talk about business, we talk about ideas. We always share resources and ideas, and we have a beer or two or 10, and that's where the conversation gets going. And so I wanted to keep this really casual, just have fun and just like say cool shit. And that's kind of the whole purpose of the Whiskey Fridays. And so I thought, James, what's happening, man? Good to see you. Feel free to join in. Handsome guy, jump in. I got a seat open for you, brother.
Hey, Curtis, this week on the Dragon's Den, there was two guys from Sussex, New Brunswick, and what they did is they had this thing. It's called Sussex beard wax or beard shampoo and stuff. And he was like he was a dude. One of the guys had a big long beard like yours, and they got a deal. They actually got a deal to sell, to push their products around Canada and the US and stuff. But I saw you got the big beard, and I said, hey, I got to tell you about that. Sussex beard shampoos, and you can do your mustache and you can turn it all up and all that stuff. So you got to check it out. Yeah,
this is a bearded dreamboat, man.
And they've got really cool T-shirts that say Sussex beard something on them, and it's like I said, you know what? I would totally buy one of those T-shirts.
Well, you have to get the beard.
Go ahead, yeah.
I got to. I don't know. I guess I could try. I'd have to put a fake one on first, see what it looked like. That's a lot of investment.
You would look good, man. If you had a beard on, you'd kill it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially with the hair too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you got the hair, right?
You're sexy. Yeah. But what happens is as for me, like as I get older and I start to lose the hair, I just push it down this way. Right?
Yeah. Mine's going on my back now, which I don't want.
All right. So let's get things going. You know what's funny is as I was I was taking some notes for myself before we did this. I was like, okay, what are some of the high level ideas around psychology, influence? And I started writing them down. And you know what I listed? I listed 13. So happy Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And so I always think my back. I've always thought. I mean, everybody's always like skeptical, or what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Superstitious. And superstitious about all this stuff. I always look at any time something like that lines up, it's like an opportunity. It's like, cool, what are we going to do with this? And so I always look at it a different way. So Friday the 13th has always been like, okay, let's crank it out. Let's see what we can do and howl at the moon. So
how about serendipitous?
Sarah, ooh, baby. How about what was the word we used the other day? It was elegant.
Audacious?
No. What was the word? James, type it in there if you remember it. It was the word we were talking with James about.
Oh, right. Yeah.
James, type it in. Tell us what it is. But why don't we kick it off? I'm going to kick it to you, Mr. Bunker. I asked you to, on this one, to sort of lead the charge and almost interview style. Just throw some questions out there. You had some stuff that you put together. And then we're going to just jump in and do a bit of roundtable. Anybody that's watching, if you do like /Q or you type it in the questions, if you have the questions that you have, throw it at us, and we're happy to do it. If you want to join, click on the join seat, and just don't be weird. I would say don't be sexist or racist or just a weirdo. Just come in, be cool. That's about it for rules. So, Mike, you kick it off, brother.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So today we're talking about body language and psychology and all that stuff. And one of the things that, Joe, when you and I first started talking, we were saying, like, how should we communicate with someone? And, like, you know, do I say you should do this or we should do that, like using inclusive language, or am, like when I'm talking with a potential new client, should I be saying you should do that, or should I say should we go and one thing that we could do is do that? So are there any tips on that, like on the use of you or we or stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, for the language, I think it really, what I see a lot of people doing is they jump in and they start to just give advice. And so one of the things I always try and build into, because I always come at it from the position of sales and influence, and inclusive language and exclusive language really doesn't matter. It depends on the context of the conversation too often. And so I'll get into it in a sort of as we go, but I always build what's called a 3-part conversation. And that 3-part conversation is really your ability to ask a question so that you can get some clarity around what the other person is feeling. And by asking that question, that's going to uncover something that's on their mind, whether they say, I'm looking for a change, I'm looking to be more happy, I'm thinking about the future, whatever they say, it's kind of a surface conversation. That what we're trying to do is uncover something that they said, pinpoint, say, well, what does change look like for you? And most of the time, what we end up seeing is that I see, especially on the sales side, is we have like a list of questions, stuff that's kind of on our agenda that we want to get to. And so we start to say, well, why are you thinking about doing this? And they say, well, I'm thinking about making a change, blah, blah, blah. We say, great. Now, how long have you been thinking about doing this? They say, well, I've been thinking about doing this. And we do that, rattle all these questions. And eventually it feels like an interrogator. Oh, and I have this light. It feels like this. Right? It feels like, tell me all, because it's way too bright for what I wanted to do. But
like my light's too bright.
How many leads do you get? We start to totally hammer in on people, and we become this interrogator. And this now I can't find a place for my light. I'm going to throw it here. But this interrogating sort of judge fix model is the one that a lot of people jump into, as we start to judge and try and fix problems. And as guys, we know this is a challenge for the women we're with, because it's natural for us to want to fix their problems. And so when we use the language, it should be using questions, using language to help other people frame what's going on in their mind. And so we ask a question, they tell us something, we say, well, now what does that mean? Who else is involved in this discussion? What else is going on? And they start to go, that's a good question. Now they start to tell you more. And the more we can dig deep and the more we can create implications around what's happening, and we resist that urge to like jump in and fix it for them, then we can say, okay, now we both understand where the problem is. Whatever language you use at that point, now it's both, rather than you facing them, you kind of now go side by side and say, let's solve this thing together. And whatever language you use at that point doesn't actually matter. You say, oh, here's what I think. And you know what we can do is it looks like this and it goes like this. Now, what do you think about that? And if you guys aren't both facing the problem from the same frame, the same lens, then it ends up you trying to pitch and trying to sell to them. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of what you're looking at, especially from the sales side, is really getting inside the head of your customers and not telling them what the problem is, not telling what the solution is, but holding back and getting them to start to come to that realization on their own.
And then that becomes more powerful because then I'm getting some echo there, but it becomes more powerful because then they are feeling it and driving it from themselves, and they feel like there's a direction that they're going in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Positive direction. Yeah.
And when we look, and part of that is just, if we look on a scale, if you just simply go and say, here's what I have to offer, here's what I'm charging for it, typically now price becomes the big thing that weighs down. And by asking those questions, by framing that, all of a sudden the problem starts to take weight and they start to see it in a different way. And if you can share with them a big idea or an insight, or through your questions, they come to their own aha moment, now your value skyrockets, your ability to get inside their head. They start to feel, holy cow. And if you give them great ideas, then they decide. I was just sharing this with a client earlier. I said, when I go and speak at different events, my goal is not to sell them on me. My goal is to get them to go, that's interesting. And then the next thought they should have is, can I do this on my own? Or could this person help? Is it better to hire this person to help me do that? And so by getting them to that realization, you move them to a place where they're like, I need to do something, not hire them, but I need to do something about it.
So we could have like a little thing called things that make you go,
That's on my notes. That's on my notes.
Okay.
I did
things
a
that make you go,
podcast. Things that make you go, So Curtis, we did, Mike and I did a call, and then later that day I did a podcast. Nobody can see where I'm pointing, but I'm waving with my hands. But we did a podcast, and I did a podcast, and I added that on there. So the things that make you go, And now I've incorporated that in all of my training, in my sales conversation training, because the goal is to get your customer to go, And if you can get them to go, you win. Now they go, tell me more. Let's go. And they want to know more rather than judging you, right?
And then at that point, like you know, from what I've learned as well, it's like, you know, even if you're trying to sell a service or a product or something, and you haven't even talked about price yet, once they've done that, then it's like they're already in anyway. So it makes the next process a lot easier, right?
And again, it goes back to now it's just two humans talking. You're not being a weirdo, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to just jump in and say that first off, I think Joe and I probably are good friends because I love listening and Joe loves talking. So when we get together, it's really easy to have build that rapport because, we're both really comfortable in both of those roles. And so that's one thing to kind of discuss about body language and communication. But also I was wanting to pick up on something that you had in the question itself, because originally the way you framed it was, we should, or, you should, the word should, I think is an interesting one, especially from a business development, or maybe what I like to call it is more business encouragement. Because once you take that superiority level position, which is not what I think that you were saying, Joe or Mike, but I think that what you were saying is that you're stepping up and having a forward-looking position, a position where you can see something that they can't. So then, therefore, a leadership role, you're in that, and it's a cooperation of getting on the same level and saying, being the periscope or looking at over the hill and saying, hey, I see this, you'll be interested in it. Let's do this together. And then taking the language of the should, because sometimes it's like, you should do this or you should do that, when it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I would like to do that. Well, yeah. Or, how about, let's be on the same page here and not have a guilt trip about how you should run your business, but rather an encouragement of how you should get it done. But
yeah, so that's why it's important to know in which situations to use, certain terminology or words, so that you do get them at equal level, and you're not intimidating them or making them feel bad, or that's kind of what I was thinking. I know, for example, I've done it before with some of my friends where I'll go, you should do this and you should do that. And then it's like, well, they never really asked me in the first place. So here I am giving my advice, and it didn't really work. It actually was a big failure.
Yeah. And you're totally right, man. And it's Curtis is bang on, and it touches on something that we've talked about in a couple of other ones and here's me talking more than listening, but that's fine. It's my blab, whatever. The whole idea of
you're the king blabber.
I've been blab, man. It's week 5, and so I'll learn how to behave. But the idea of if you're positioning yourself in business development and selling, is that your goal is really to move yourself as a strategic partner, as a resource, as an asset to the company that you want to do business with, rather than an employee or simply a vendor or a nuisance of somebody trying to sell something. And I'm helping the meeting I was just at before this, helping a lady who's doing a startup, and she's super talented, coming from this background of marketing. And the whole goal is to not, when you start a business, is not to just create a bunch more jobs for yourself, but to be a partner for the clients that you want to work with. And so it's never about, what they should or what you should do, but it's about what are we going to do together? What are we doing as partners? And any time that you lose that control and you are treated like an employee, or you act like an external person, that you're not invested in this and you tell them what to do, and you lose that sort of respected strategic partner relationship, you lose. Whether you're in a higher position or they're a higher position, you guys should be working on the same problem together. So language really does play a role in how we're communicating that and keeping control of the calls without being, I would say, overly pushy.
So when just as Curtis was saying, and this is with all due respect and everything, when Joe, when you were talking a lot, and then we're listening, or I'm kind of interjecting every so often, we as listeners, we can be interested in it, or we can be so you're educating us and we're really listening and this is really cool. Or we can just kind of tune out and go, hey, we're bored. I'm not saying that, but what happens is that I read before, like that there's something like it's like a reptilian brain or something, and you do you know about that stuff? Like you trigger like if they're not like that reptilian brain will actually say, hey, it's either fight or flight, or I'm bored, or I'm if you're entertaining me, then I'm going to keep going, and I don't feel it as a threat. What do you think about that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in. Sure. Well, especially with the reptilian brain aspect too, because I'm really interested in that kind of stuff. Taking it to the next level, I think is exactly the way you said. There is those indicators of a person that's kind of bored or not really into it, or not building rapport with their body language and their listening skills through eye contact and some authentic ways. We've had this conversation before, rather than tactics, but like ways that we can mark as indicators that we're on the same page or the same level, or we're connecting. Watching for those indicators, I think, is important, and it'd be a really good conversation. But also when you're talking, and this is kind of a synthetic environment and good for what we're doing here in the lab, is if you're listening to somebody, but in your mind, you're thinking about the next thing you want to say, and you're like, I'm just waiting, like, okay. And then do you know how you can kind of like cut out like what they're actually talking about? And it's like, okay, I got the idea. I know what I want to say next. And then however long you ramble on for, it's 5 or 10 minutes, I didn't even really listen, because I'm trying to like formulate what I'm going to say or how I'm going to interject into that conversation prior.
Yeah.
Present moment. Yeah.
Jump robe. I think Steve's talking jump rope, but that's a new thing. We're going to use that jump robe.
Ask any questions.
It's like when somebody's talking and you just want to like jump in their robe and just be there with them. Is that what we mean, Steve?
But,
I think that's what he means.
I think Steve would mean that.
Yeah. So,
but that's something like when we so when we are having a conversation with someone, like we're talking about, for me, maybe some of my services that I'm providing, and then maybe I'm becoming too technical. So then they just kind of tune out, but it's up to me to take that signal and go, okay, I need to change my approach because it's obviously not working.
Yeah.
So that's a signal, like, body language, or, just by listening to them, that's super important to change the approach. Otherwise you're just going to, keep going on, and they're going to, can't wait for it to be over.
Absolutely.
Well,
we had a good. Go ahead, Kurt. Yeah, Tim.
We had a good conversation. We had a good conversation, Joe, about this the other day. I'll organically, you just went there, and I'm here now. So this is NLP, and we're just, we're both kind of, mirroring behavior and stuff like that. This, when it's used as a tactic to get to build rapport, it doesn't come across very authentic. And then now it's a different strategy. Now it gets weird. Whereas, if we were sitting together and we both had our legs crossed the same way, and it naturally or organically, authentically became mirrored, that's what I was saying, is having indicators that says, oh, that's an indicator we are building rapport, rather than thinking through in your mind, oh, they're crossing their legs, I should cross mine, to build rapport. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I remember reading in the book about the interview process back in the days, many years ago, and it was like saying you should mirror them and you should, do this. And then, Joe, we talked before about it. I remember being in an interview one time, and the person didn't know how to do an interview, and I wasn't going to get my information across. Yeah. So I had to take over the interview, but let them feel like they are still running it. And
Steve, that's it, man. You got it, buddy. We sat in the lower chair. I will jump in on the reptilian brain, just so people have sort of is because I do, just so you guys know, I'm a big nerd on psychology, neuroscience, the newest area, which is called social cognitive neuroscience. It's only in the last probably about 20 years that we've been able to use fMRIs to study the brain and how it reacts in the wild when circumstances are happening. And so people are starting to see how things that maybe we intuitively know are actually working. And I pulled up this book, and I don't know if you can see it. This is a great book, but if I turn it, I don't know if it shows, but if you turn it, there's other words. But this is called subliminal, how your unconscious mind rules your behavior. And it says in the words that you can't see, hey there, yes, you sexy, buy this book now. You know you want it. It's hilarious. But this is a great book talking about how unconscious communication drives everything that we do. But in the way that the brain has evolved, we have been evolved as creatures that try and keep ourselves safe. Safety is first. And so our reptilian brain is exactly what Curtis is talking about, that fight or flight. It's when somebody walks in the room, I either trust that person or I don't trust that person. This feels right. This doesn't feel right. And that's how we've evolved. And so what we do is we always have these defense mechanisms up. As we evolved, we developed the limbic system, which is all for relationships and associative memory and being able to look at the social context of how everybody's integrated. And the most recent brain is our neocortex, or our thinking brain. But what happens when we're selling to people is we beat people over the head with like features and benefits and logic and trying to give them all the stuff. And because we think, well, the brain's just one big computer. But if somebody just gives you this like crazy complicated spreadsheet and says, now it's your problem, how likely are you going to do something with it? Well, you're not. And so when people come to me, one of the big questions when we do sales training is, hey, can you teach us how to handle objections, right? And so objections, when we talk about from psychology, objections are old school. So if you have people that are giving you objections, most likely you're too late. Because when somebody verbally, like physically states what they will or won't do, they're more likely to adhere to that behavior when it comes time to taking action. And so what we talk about a lot is reducing resistance. And so resistance is, that instant knee-jerk reaction versus also anticipated future regret. Like if Curtis comes to me and says, I have this great idea, my first thing is going to be the reptilian brain is going to kick in and say, do I trust this guy? And if I do, that puts it at bay. And then I like the relationship that we have. And then when it comes time for a decision, if I'm not feeling right about it, I won't take action. But if he says, here's what it looks like, the anticipated future regret means if I take action, will I regret it in the future? Or if I don't take action, will I regret it in the future? And by understanding those forces at play, it means that you got to be really careful when positioning an offer, when selling to somebody, that you don't get those knee-jerk reactions to happen too soon, because now you're out of the conversation. People are going to start to say no and resist too soon. And so that's always something I look at is, how do I keep people in that limbic system, using stories, using emotions, using the right language, asking the questions so they become emotionally involved in the dialogue before we say, here's what we're going to do. And then we strip away all the bullshit, all of the technical stuff, all of the stuff that will cloud our decision and keep them really short on what's the next step. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen like culturally like differences in how you communicate with people? Like, so say, for example, if you were dealing with people in China or Japan versus people from USA or Canada, do you see differences in how to approach people, or is it still the same type of communication?
Yeah, there are definitely differences in the way that we communicate, and it's going to be depending on situation, and we're probably not going to go into all the cultural things. But before you go into that kind of a scenario, being aware that there are different sort of cultural biases, and also there's different bias between different generations, between the sexes, between the kinds of companies, and when we do a lot of work on segmenting and understanding our customers before you go into a situation, you better have a lot of that empathy skill built in so that before you get into the scenario, that you know how to behave and that you know where you can push and pull, because you can very quickly lose that conversation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Absolutely.
One good one, I'll just chime in here. That I might as well mention now is engaging that connection and building rapport. One good technique is mitigating post-buyer's regret, or mitigating that aspect is to have consuming something at the same time as meeting with it. So there's a reason that the first date is usually over a supper, and even to say the word supper, the root is to sup or fellowship. Your stomach controls 90% of your serotonin. So if you're having a good meal and with a person that you are connect with and stuff like that, it's going to automatically release those serotonin, those feelings of like, oh yeah, no, this is a good decision, or like I really connect with this person. So just one thing to throw in there as well.
Cool.
So how come, Curtis, on our first date, you took me to bowling alley?
That's good. I have so many ways I could answer that. I wish we were, not recording this, and I would have a couple.
What's funny is I have a client, and we were looking at. We actually did a bunch of work. It was 2 weeks ago. We just started working together, and they're in a highly like LDS community. And we started talking about the cultural differences and how that community is different. And really, it comes down to empathy. then understanding, what are the things that are exciting for your customers? What are some cultural things that they're proud of? Not so much avoiding the things that they don't want to talk about, but focusing in on things that are important and the values. And there's always going to be different value systems for different groups. And you need to understand those values, and you need to understand how to find the shared values versus how to sort of, eke your way into those values. You know what I mean? You find the commonality. And if you can't find commonality, chances of doing business is probably going to drop dramatically. And so when you can find even just a few different key points of values, that's what's going to drive that connectivity.
Cool. So, Joe, one of the things that we talked about before was what's his name is Oran Klaff?
Yeah, Oran Klaff. Yeah.
Oran Klaff, and about frames and controls. Did you want to talk about that? Like just about how he? Yeah, that's it. Pitch anything. He rocks, eh?
Just so you guys know, I pulled up like some books that I was like, oh, what else are we gonna do? So these are the books that I'm referencing today, in case you want to buy them. But Oran Klaff is awesome, man. I love his stuff. Pitch anything is really cool. And Mike, you and I did some sessions on the idea of framing. And yes. I love this concept that he put together is all around control and, the sort of power dynamics that happen between two people when we're selling. And he does really, really high level, like complex sales, a lot of investment, very, very technical sales. But he goes into the same stuff we're talking about the reptilian brain limbic system, the neocortex, and how people make decisions. And the thing I love that he does, and I reference him all the time, I give him a credit, attribution, but he does this thing called frames. And what he talks about is that when people are negotiating, when they're talking, we all operate within our own sort of frame, just like we're doing right now. We all have our own frame here. Yep, and the goal is to be able to get somebody to enter into your frame. And you start to see what's going on in their world. But there's 4 frames that he talks about. The first one is the power frame. Who's in control? Who has the power here? And there's always this sort of push and pull. The next one he talks about, the time frame, is who's respecting the other person's time more. Then there's the intrigue frame, which is who's more interesting. And then the prizing frame, which is that, basically it's people that are excited enough to do business with you. And so what we're looking at is when we're talking to people, and I've been using prizing frame a lot, is when, I had a client, we were talking, and as we were negotiating our contract, I was at a golf tournament this one day, and he called me up and said, hey, I wasn't able to get a hold of you. What's going on? And what are you doing right now? And I said, oh, I'm just, pulling my golf clubs out of my trunk and I'm grabbing some whiskey. How's your corporate job as the CEO? And he's like, yeah, man, I want to be doing what you're doing. And then we're talking about these trips that we're going on and going on these yachts and doing all this fun stuff. And it's like, now it's fun to be able to do business together. So it has nothing to do with what we're doing as a business. It's just interesting to do business with that other person. That's the prizing frame. From an intrigue standpoint, is that you're a resource for them, that you have access to information or you have some insights that they're not going to get normally. And so doing business with you gives them access to this amount of interest, this amount of insight. So they go, wow, if I stop doing business, it doesn't mean that we lose our business relationship. It means I lose access and I lose this great source of info. And that's that intrigue frame. And from a time frame, I love what he said in the book, which is, if somebody says, I only have 15 minutes, you say, great, I only have 10. And then, yes. then the only option there is for them to either play ball or say, I only have 8, then you say 5. And now you built a relationship because of this funny thing that you've done. And so by controlling your time, and sometimes I see, and I used to do this where I would go into a meeting and I would let that meeting run long because I thought that was being in service to my client. But what it said was that my time is less valuable than their time. And so now I end meetings as much as I can on time or tell them I'm going to make an exception. Because if I say I'm going to run late, they say, well, who else are you doing this for? And how much, how often does this happen? And so that is there's all these subtle things that you're doing. And from a power standpoint, you really need people to feel like they're not in charge, well, not that they're not in charge, but that you guys are on the same level. As soon as the power dynamic shifts, then especially for you, if you're a consultant or you're a coach or you're a service provider, if you now are treated like an employee, now you start to have to justify your hourly cost and how much work you're doing. And you start to now play the role of a service provider. When you're a strategic partner and you're a prize and you have intrigue and you have access to info and you can actually do these things, then the price doesn't matter. There's value in doing business with you. And so that's why I love, if you guys get it, go get Pitch Anything, Oran Klaff. Wonderful, wonderful book. Super cool cool guy, actually. We chatted quite a bit. But yeah, those frames really helps me when I'm listening to a call. And Mike, you were telling me on one of your calls that you start to see this stuff happening in the wild. And you're like, oh man, I'm moving frames. I got to take that frame back. I got to reframe this.
Exactly.
It becomes a lot of fun because it's not a game. It's always a game, but it's not manipulation. It's not tricks, but it's just simply observing what's going on when you're communicating with people and resisting that urge to go into the wrong space. Because if you go too far, doors close. So that's my long, short answer.
You know what I was thinking was like during the American presidential debates and stuff, I would look at, you can look at the Republican side and the Donald Trump and some of those guys and just see how they the power frame and how they kind of go back and forth with each other. And it's like, if you've read the book, or in my case, I actually listened to the book while I was walking. And, but what happens is that you start to look at how they try to grab the power back and their approach on how to do that. So I just found that really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw one thing into it, just the, especially with the books and stuff like that, you can read a book and you can get smarter, but until you like feel it, go that 12 inches and like actually kind of understand it more from a heart perspective, that's when you understand it. And so, when you hear about listening and when you're listening or developing rapport with other people, if you're always just in your head thinking about it and it's making sense, but you're intellectually you're stimulated, but you're not in it, no connection with a rapport with your heart, you are going to miss out on the understanding and the real richness of the potential that you have in that conversation. So, and I love go ahead.
No, that was like Joe and I were speaking before about this. It's like when we're learning a lot of new terminology or techniques and stuff, and it does take a while to absorb it and just for it to come out naturally. And I compared it to learning another language. Like at first, when you speak another language than English, your mother tongue, then you're looking for your words and trying to formulate your sentences, and then after a while, you go, oh my God, I can actually speak another language, and I don't have to search for my words anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's it's the same idea when you're learning, sales techniques or you're learning anything new. It does take a while for it just to come in and then just to come out naturally, and you're not thinking ahead, as you were saying, Curtis. It's like I'm thinking about my next question I'm going to ask while I'm speaking right now. No, you want to be in the present moment, and it does take time to do that for sure.
And it comes across authentic. I've been with, I've done a lot of work with interpreters. So, okay. When you're having these conversations, they'll infuse, cultural relevance into what you say and make sure that it's, clean it up a little bit so it's not like offensive or anything else. But it'd be so funny that the classic, you'd say all the whole, like maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and then they'll say like 5 words. And I'd be like, okay, how in the world did you get all of what I was saying to forward with them in 5 words when it took me like 2 minutes to say the whole sentence? But for some reason, like just sitting there and waiting for it to be interpreted too, that's kind of weird, because you're listening, them going back to you almost have to only read body language, connect and want that connection, and then when you hear the words, you have to also give body language to say, so it's kind of fun because you can get a little bit of time to kind of read them, read how they put it forward, see their reactions to your words from somebody else saying it to them, and being able to try to like figure it out, like how it's fun. But we do it as well, even on this, but we're just not, we're not cognizant of it the same way because it's a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm. So what is the body language, if you think of percentage of communication, what is body language versus actual verbal language? Like, what is the percentage?
Well, Joe, you should probably know this. It's probably like 90 or something like that, 95% body language. I don't know the exact statistics, but
I think it's something like 93% or something. It's something
make up number. I think it's about, and then it's like 93.7.
No, I think it's 93%.
I think it's 93.6% as well.
I think it's honestly like 93.8. So
it's 93.2%. If you're in, and 9.3 if you're in Newfoundland.
Yeah. So that's, my friend Gord says it's 60%. Gord says it's 60.
Gord said, I want to see your numbers. Where's your data, Gord?
Gord.
If it's Google, then it must be right.
Yes,
Dr. Google.
Wikipedia. Wikipedia. You should start that. But it's one of the, actually, I'll give you some real numbers. Here's a study that I love. And I know actually my girlfriend joined this call, so this is perfect. Is for some reason, I always like to say this, for some reason, she always gives me these articles on how to be a better listener. Yeah. I'm assuming it's because she wants to help me with exactly this, like my sales, my business, all that kind of stuff. But we actually it was a couple months ago, we subscribed to Psychology Today, and there's this article, I think it's called, I wrote it down, it's called Einstein of Love. And it's this whole idea of what makes successful relationships. And they created at the University of Washington a thing called the Love Lab, which was really cool. And so they studied these couples. And
not the Love Shack, but the Love Lab.
It sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds really cool. Curtis, you and I should go check out the Love Lab.
Yeah. Well, they're right beside the Cuddle Club. I think it's
yeah, right beside the Cuddle Club. You bet. Focus.
That's like the Burning. There's a booth at the Burning Man.
What's happening? What's happening, Mike? Mike, come on. This is a different channel. But the Love Lab, they're talking about what happens in relationships. And I've been using this in my sales training. It's in relationships, we do these things called bids, where we sort of, it's almost like a request for acknowledgement, where we just say things like we're looking for attention. We want to get some kind of connection. We want to get, body language.
Oh, yeah.
I don't trust. TED Talk. So that's fine then.
Okay. So that's probably.
Yeah. I saw Cuddy. That's good. Okay. Amy Cuddy. But what we look at is there's these bids that we give each other. And what they found is that when the people that divorced responded on average to 33% of the bids, and the ones that maintained long-term relationships responded at 86%. And so what we did, there was this, we took this a little bit further and we looked at it. And so there was this, this story of there's a man and a woman out looking out at like on their patio or whatever, looking at trees. And the woman would say to the man, look at how beautiful those trees are. And what's a typical response for a guy?
Well, they're just trees.
Which trees are you talking about?
What trees? Or like here's how I would fix those trees, right? It's guys, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Or here's how
awesome, but I'd move them over like 6 feet.
Yeah.
6 feet.
And so what we did is I said, okay, let's take that further as it applies to sales. And what's the response that the guy's supposed to give? I mean, communication is a magical thing. When I talk to people, I always say, let's make sure, like I've got a pen all the time, is that when you're talking to somebody in a sales conversation or anything, are we taking notes? Are we pinpointing things that they're saying? And so when she says, hey, look at how beautiful those trees are, what should he say? And I know, Mike, we talked about this before.
Just write it down in your journal.
Yeah. But Mike, what's the answer?
What do you find? What do you like about those trees?
Yeah.
And what do you find pretty about those trees, or what do you like about them? What do you
find beautiful about those trees? And Renee, I am actually drinking whiskey. This is why I love this forum.
I want to jump in. You know what I would say? I would say, what romantic thing would you love to do under those trees?
Easy now. So let's come back to me, guys. Come back. So what I'm saying is that she says, look at how beautiful those trees are. And the answer is, what about those trees do you find beautiful? And that's what we build into this. We're still talking sales. This is what we're talking about, sales. We build that into the dialogue so that when we're talking to somebody, there's what we do is we ask a question. And we try and find out what it is that's going on in our customer's mind. And they're going to say something. There's something that they're going to say. They're going to mention something about change, or they're going to mention something about the future, or something about that they're scared of. And what you do is you use your pen and you write down that thing while we're talking about listening that Curtis was talking about, and you pay attention. Because when you pay attention, they're going to tell you everything. And then when they stop saying something, you say, hey, you were talking about change. What about the situation do you want to change? What about those trees do you find beautiful? And by doing that, you create a connection, and they say, you're listening. Because most people today, with all this stuff that's grabbing our attention, is we don't feel listened to. So if you're talking to a customer and you pinpoint something they said and you turn that into something important to you, they're going to tell you the real answer. And there's a term that I love. Have you guys heard of confabulation?
No.
I love this term. I learned it in one of my books. I love these books because I just learn words and I just say them. People don't know what I mean. Confabulation is our natural tendency when we're talking to somebody that we don't necessarily have a relationship with, to sort of answer them with what we think is more of a societal norm of something that we think that they would like to hear, and it's a safe answer. And so, for example, the example they gave in the book was if you're out this like really high-end party, everything was wonderful at this penthouse, and now the driver is driving you home, and they say, what do you like about that party? Most likely, through the studies they did, they're going to say, I like the people, because that's probably the safest answer. And so what that means is confabulation is understand that when you first, if you're talking to your customer and you ask those first questions, most likely the answers you're going to get fall into this category of confabulation, where they just say what they think is acceptable. That's why when you pinpoint something they say and you say, hey, that thing that you said is important to me, can you clarify that for me? The next thing they tell you is the real answer. Then if we can build our questions to understand the implications of that, that's how we uncover a real deep need in our customers and in our conversations. And that's why the psychology part of this, really, really comes into play, because if we just simply keep it surface, the chances of them converting and doing something with us drop dramatically. So those are my two big keys there.
Cool.
Yeah, like we talked a little bit about the emotional aspect of it too. I'll throw a question out to you guys. What do you feel the percentage is? Well, maybe that's not the right way to ask it, but how do you feel that how much emotions are involved when you're talking with somebody? And, because a lot of times we think that, we should have no emotion and it all should be intellect, and we should have, because emotions are kind of create drama and gray area and misunderstanding and stuff like that. What do you feel emotions have to play with regards to communication, and especially with clients?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of emotion that you have, because you want to work with people that are fun and happy and pleasant and knowledgeable and can provide a service for you. You don't want to work with someone who's angry or not a nice person. Or arrogant, stuff like that. So it's creating it's having the right energy that you can you're going to have fun and work together. Yeah. That's what I would say.
Hey, what's up, guys? How are you?
Hey, Beehive.
I literally have minutes, and it's funny that every time you're talking about clients, I have clients in the salon, and it's like I want to tell them something, but I can't say anything in front of the clients. But I've been jumping in and out of the call, and I thought I had a pretty interesting thing for what you guys were talking about. We have as an organic hair salon, right? So most of the clients that come in are going to blame ingredients, or they're going to come in. So our new clients are always going to have questions that are crazy, but ultimately they're leaving someone. So we'll call it a salesperson, but in our case, it's another stylist. So my job when I intake a new client is out of the gate, they're going to come at me with 10 different questions, but the emotional side of it is really the first thing. So I have to spend some time and reel them back in. So I let them hit me with questions, but you believe how many times that I have to say, well, let's start over. What's your first name? Like, you just hit me with 10 questions and I don't even know who you are. And then I can kind of, pat them on the back, give them a quick hug, depending on who they are. If my wife's looking, no, I'm kidding. But reality is the emotional side of it is always going to be precedent. And maybe that's just our particular case, but it's definitely something that we have to think about on our end right away.
Yeah, for sure. Here's what I would say, because everybody always wants to talk emotions, and we can get into storytelling and all that. I would, when we talked about the 3-part brain, I would lump emotions into the complete limbic system. And a limbic system is the combination of emotions, associative memory, and social context, because sometimes we think, well, we want to get to the emotions of what they're feeling. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to tap into their emotions. It means that you need to tap into that part of their brain. And by through your storytelling or through the way you communicate, what you're trying to do is find a way to get into their world. They don't need to get them upset or crying or excited or anything. They can still be totally flatlined. But if something that you're saying through, whether it's a story that you tell, whether it's a testimonial you use or something that you do, they start to go, and it starts to affect them on a more visceral level. That's what we're trying to do. And so we don't need people to get, that's why I always resist sort of the emotional side of it. We're trying to get people to start to think, and Curtis is, I think he's leaving and coming back in, but we're trying to get people to now start to think, how does this apply to me? And so the emotions is really connecting the thing to the self. And so it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be emotional. It just means that we're trying to connect them to the idea. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Makes complete sense.
Yeah. And so if you see somebody that's like very like flatline, non-emotional, your job's not to make them emotional, but the stuff that you do, welcome back, Curtis, the stuff that you do, connect to them into that limbic system. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying, because I was just saying a bunch of stuff and I'm drinking whiskey.
Well, it's tough because I was missing the connection there. It wasn't coming through very well for me. So it was really weird because it was kind of like stuttering and shuddering. I couldn't follow it. So unfortunately, I'm the one who asked the question and I don't know how to follow up with that. But it's sounding good now.
Oh, he's gone. Okay.
And I remember back, I mean, if you think about, like, for me, I know when I'm being pitched to, I'm kind of a bit of a douchebag when people are selling to me. Because I use my
no way.
I use my douchebag face, and I'm like, okay, and I do like the let me think about this, and I ask questions, and they don't know if it's affecting me emotionally, but everything that we do connects with people into that limbic system. Everything we do, and so we feel whether this is safe or not safe, or whether we like it, whether this feels right, all that kind of stuff, and so that's what we want to really think about.
Yeah.
So in that case, Joe, what you were just saying about, if you're testing them or, you're being a douchebag, it's kind of for you. Then I would probably at that point, I would probably try to use humor, or I try to break your bubble a little bit. I would try to approach it from that point of view, just to try to see some emotion coming from you and not having such a wooden face.
Well, here's the funny part though, Bunks, is that, I'm sometimes I'm like that movie Unbreakable, and so it's part of that.
Unbreak my heart,
yeah, baby. Is that when I'm being sold to, it's kind of like there's this thing. I'm just trying to see how serious the person is, and so part of that is we talk about that, like, don't be a weirdo, and the weirdness factor is the distance between how you normally are and how you present, and if I'm throwing you off, and it makes you weird, or makes you start to not be who you are, and you're trying to change. If you're naturally not jokey, if you're naturally not like doing that, and you try and force it, that distance, that gap, that reptilian brain kicks in. And so the trick is if somebody's not responding emotionally, don't change you. Be even more authentically you, and say, screw this guy. If it was me, say, screw him. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to have fun with this. I don't need the business. And I'm just going to go through and just ask questions. And if I can't connect with them, so be it. Right? Too many people try and make adjustments to try and resonate with this other person when, you know what, they don't need to. I've got a workshop next week. I'm doing it with a bunch of engineers. I don't have to be on the same page as all the engineers, but I have to be me. Right? We have to try and help them solve problems, but I don't need to get everybody entertained doing trust falls and clapping and singing and doing like a Tony Robbins kind of thing. We just have to solve problems, and we all have to feel like we're being the realest we can. If I try and force somebody into my world, that's kind of still a douche move, right?
So the gentleman that was just on here, like with the guy with the organic hair salon, when he was saying like he gets new clients coming in and sometimes he has to, they're asking him a ton of questions, and there's an education thing. There is in that business, there's you're trying to do probably a cut within 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something. And he's got to move them on, right. To make money. Mm-hmm. But there is a certain point of where I'm going with this is that there's how much time do you, like, how do you educate them and then keep the thing going, and you're trying to respect a certain amount of time. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, you don't want to be, there's an amount of time for something, but maybe someone needs a little bit more hand holding versus we just got to get the show on the road. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it isn't as rushed as that. It's about 30 to 45 minutes for a men's cut, and then 45 to 60 minutes for women's cut. And there's a lot of time, like if you're doing a color, and then you have processing time. So there is quite a bit of time. It could be up to 2.5 hours of building rapport with somebody. And I think, Joe's got some good stuff because he works with us in our salon to help the stylists be able to sell and be authentic. But you're with them for quite a while consulting. You are selling to them, the whole time. And really what it comes down to is that authenticity. Because when you work on that, we're made out of water and a bunch of other elements. When the authentic level is directly reflects your magnetic personality and magnetic aspects of who you are, and people will be more drawn to what you have to say, who you are, what you can suggest by, being more and more authentic. And I think that's the interesting part of what Joe was saying, is that even if you're not resonating with them because maybe they don't find you magnetic or you don't find them magnetic in what you're saying, that if you still just go back to being the basics of being authentic, that will refresh the relationship, or it'll just not be a good relationship and you just move on.
Mm-hmm. In your case, go ahead. In your case too, like you are an influencer. Like I know, for example, when I go to get my hair cut, I always the guy who cuts my hair. I just say to him, I go, what product should I use in my hair? And he'll say this one here, and it's like $25 or something for a little thing, and I'll go, yeah, okay, that's it, because he's telling me what to buy, and I'm trusting his that he knows best for my type of hair. So that's what you're in your business, like you're selling. People are trusting your experience, right? Because you know that's your bailiwick, right?
It's definitely a consultative selling process.
Yeah.
And I think part of, where Curtis was going with that is really when we part of we focus in on the psychology. There's you guys have maybe heard of mirror neurons before. Is mirror neurons are the sort of the way that we connect with other people. And I always talk about just confidence in everything that you're doing, price confidence, process confidence. When we talk about gaining commitment, getting somebody to take action, I never say do it with a question mark. If I say, hey, Mike, would you like to do this? And is this okay? And would you please be okay? If it's like, no, the next step is it goes like this and it goes like this. And you go, yeah. And you feel excited and confident because I'm confident. When I come into Curtis's salon, if he's confident that, about what he's doing, I have to now, from a tribal standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, if everybody is like that at his salon and everybody's like, hey, how's it going? And what can we help you with? And I ask a bunch of questions, and everything I say doesn't faze him. And he's like, oh, that's a great question. And he answers it and he's happy. And everybody around him is associating with him and all of his staff are having a nice time. I either select myself into that tribe or select myself out of it. But if I feel that there's any kind of chaos in that tribe, if there's any sort of inconsistency between who he says he is and who he actually is, I start to invent my own story and I start to put up my guard and my barriers. And so if you have a business where you have a bunch of staff, consistency and that, that shared values and what you're presenting to people has to be absolutely apparent so that I decide, do I want to be a part of this business or not? And if at the end of the day, I don't want to, that is not a failure of the business. That just means that's not a good fit. But if you do this well, people start to go, there's more to this than just answering my questions. And you don't have to convince them, right? You just have to create the atmosphere where people just want to become a part of that tribe. And especially as a salon, what I know about what you guys do that's awesome, and with what James is doing, is you're creating an environment, you're creating an atmosphere, you're creating an experience that people just get to be excited about. And they get to say, hey, I know a guy. I've got this. These are my people. This is my tribe. And when we have a tribe, we're much more willing to participate actively and spend more money within that tribe.
Yeah. And what I find too is when I get my hair cut, like the salon can be really busy, but then I feel like there's, when he cuts my hair, that even though it's really busy, there is that I feel like I'm like, there's personal service happening and he creates that connection. And I think he does that with a lot of his clients. That's why he has such a big following. And so that's kind of I think it's his personality, and also he's just learned how things work, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I love what you said, Joe, about the consistency too of the message, because I know we struggle with that at times because we do brand ourselves as a holistic beauty salon, holistic beauty concept, and we do try to do as much organic stuff and eco-friendly and everything else, but there are limits to what we can do as well, and sometimes the staff isn't always fully educated, I guess, sometimes, or as passionate as we are about maybe being eco-friendly or something. And then when people ask them, well, what are your sustainability initiatives? And it just blows me away sometimes. People are like, well, we recycle, our containers and and our hair. That's kind of interesting. But they don't know all the stuff that we're doing. And it blows my mind, thinking that they're part of this culture. They joined us for a reason. And in the interview, they told us all about what we do and what they loved about it. But yet, put on the spot, they're thinking maybe more about their haircut or something else, and it doesn't really resonate as big of a priority for them. And then, but we'll talk to another stylist, and it'll be something completely different. So it's interesting, that consistency of the message and how you train your staff or your clients to be your next referral, as you go along.
I'm just cheersing Matthew. He's giving me. I didn't know how he did the icon, but he's the goods. And you're bang on, man. I did an activity with a client a couple weeks ago, and when I do my stuff in sales training, I'm a real deep analyst on what we're looking at, and so we have they have people that are answering their phones, booking, and then transferring those appointments or those people to a sales rep. And when we actually started listening to those calls, and what was happening is that we found that 50% of those calls that were being transferred, some of them were mishandled. Some of those didn't have information that we collected. The way that we transferred them didn't actually set that rep up for success. So they had to start sort of behind the 8 ball. And based on that, and based on all the other conversions we mapped out, we calculated for that one business, it was $1 million a year problem. Wow. Based on the revenue model and based on conversions. It was real numbers. And so what I'm saying is that in your business, in any business, first impressions and the first point of contact, if we think about the 80-20 rule, you guys have heard of Pareto principle, right? Mm-hmm. Is that 80% of the results come from 20% of your activities. Often we end up doing all of this chasing, if I go here, all of this chasing of business that we shouldn't have screwed up in the first place. Just like I always, when if you go on a date, especially for women, if you go on a date and the guy blows it on the date and he starts to chase you afterwards, you screwed up, man. Right? Discounted chasing, Steve Bertrand. That if you start chasing people that you screwed up in the first place, stop screwing them up. First impressions, that first point of contact, that speed to authenticity, how much you kick ass on that first call, and when people walk into your business, decides everything for the long-term relationship. If all of a sudden you do something stupid and you don't see it, guaranteed they do. And so all of these little things add up, and we don't really see them. So we always got to look at our business with a fresh set of eyes and say, if this was me, how would I feel? How long do I wait until I greet somebody because I'm on the phone busy with my own crap, right? And that's all of those things add up to equate to, you know what, if we did that really, really well, the rest of it's really easy. So when we get a new lead, how fast do we get to it? How well do we respond to that? What information, what value do we give so that they go, wow, this is the one place I want to do business with? And from a psychology perspective, if we don't do that, unconsciously we communicate to people that we're not the place to do business with. So it's, I've got 2 minutes left on this thing. Reggie, I know that you've just joined and we've got 2 minutes going, and I'm going to say welcome to you, but I'm going to go around the horn here, and maybe if Mike, you want to just, everybody, we'll start with Mike, then Curtis, and I'll finish up. Just kind of give your quick idea of why psychology, body language, and influence is important with everything we do in business. And go.
Okay. Well, for me, it's super important for just to establish the connection or the relationship with the new person, with the client, and it's also being consistent with that person. I think when you're consistent and you develop this rapport, and that builds the relationship, and it makes it lasting.
Ever lasting.
Yeah. Forever lasting.
I love that. Like absolutely, that. Man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
K-Rock.
So for me, the currency of relationships, just like cigarettes are a currency in prison, the currency of relationships for me is rapport. It's absolutely necessary to continually be evaluating your rapport with somebody, and that comes with being consistent, like you said, authenticity, having a magnetic, personality, taking care of yourself, and having that self-confidence and knowing, really who you are and what you have to offer. Builds into that consultative selling process where people are coming to you to be able to, to be able to get some suggestions and to follow your lead. And a proper healthy relationship with any client, with an employee, with a friend, with a parents, a wife, all comes down to those three, body language, psychology, influence, and how we are, ourselves, connecting with what we hear, not just with our ears and not with just our mind, but with our heart, and having a proper emotional connection with people, and continually just fostering that rich rapport level. So
totally, man. So I love that you guys are here, and this is the big thing I always say is body language is actually quite simple. Ooh, who's got my?
Oh, that was actually. Hold it 1 second. That's something a speaker just went.
I'm trying to Jerry Springer at the end, like deep thoughts or whatever he does. And you're killing me, brother. Body language is really simple. Everything we do, I'll finish with two ideas.
Sorry.
In our brains, there's two parts of our brains. I love that in this subliminal book I was telling you about, there's two parts of our brains. There's the scientist and the lawyer. And our scientist part of our brain is the one that says, let's look for these ideas and theories and put this together and then prove what works and what doesn't. Let's test it all. And then the lawyer part of our brain starts with a conclusion and then does everything it can to support that conclusion and disprove anything that doesn't support it. The problem is that our brains are really good scientists, but really shitty or really good scientists, but really amazing lawyers. And so what we always do is we continually say, well, that's just how I've always done it. And so what I would say is that the easiest way to understand body language, you go out networking or you do a sales call, you do something, whatever you say, whatever you do, if somebody nods and is interested, that's good. If you say something and they're just blankly staring at you, that's probably shitty. Don't say that anymore. That's the rule. And so if you continually get into this scientist mode of not pitching and being really observant of everything you're doing, that becomes a really cool, if I go this way, really cool escalating self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to get better and better and better. And so that's what I would say is everything you do, put it to the test. So many people work on scripts and building the perfect funnel and building this thing and think it's perfect, but it's not perfect until you test it with humans, because humans are weird. Humans don't do things that we expect. We think we're going to behave a certain way. We don't. And so from a body language, psychology, influence standpoint, everything you do with people, test it until you start to see them like the end of the Matrix and see them as numbers and zeros and see how things are going to happen and start to anticipate needs. It does take practice, like Mike says. And so that's what I want to kind of end on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to thank you guys for joining me. Curtis, you're rad. Mike's rad. I'm going to thank James for joining us from the salon and all the people that are watching. We do have a bunch of people that just recently joined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stop the recording. So that's going to go up onto YouTube. And then we're going to keep chatting if you guys want to keep chatting. And I'm going to hit